Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is useful human Arif Hassan. Arif, I feel like we just talked. I feel like we just had a phone conversation.
Yeah, it's a weird feeling. Don't really know why that's the case.
Yeah.
I think we're growing closer as enemies, James.
That must be it, actually. It's a darn shame. At some point, we're just going to have a series of prank videos up on YouTube where we're trying to ruin each other. And God.
But why did they cheer?
So, as a side note, it appears that College Humor, a website that I certainly went to back when I was in college, and Arif did as well, appears to be on its way out. And as a result, Arif and I were talking about our favorite things from back when it was a thing. And my favorite video from theirs is either Power Thirst, the Daria live action casting, which was fantastic, or there's a prank video from Amir and the other guy, where it's a basketball prank video, where it's like a half court shot, and they rig the contest for the half court shot. So he goes down into the bowels of the stadium and signs his release and everything. Meanwhile, the guy who's pranking him goes out in front of the whole crowd and is like, "Hey, no matter what happens when he puts that blindfold on and he throws up the shot, cheer like hell, cheer like crazy." And the place goes absolutely nuts, and it's just a fantastic.
Funny.
It's so great.
Oh my God.
The guy loses his mind.
Yeah. And I hate like public pranks and stuff like that. Like I just can't do like prank shows for prank YouTube. Mm-hmm. And that video is so funny. It's so good.
And when it's revealed that it's a prank, oh God. It's not even a hurtful one. It's just wants to curl up into the smallest ball on the floor and die. It was so great. Check that out in the show notes. It's too bad what's happening out there, but with these things happening, and these things happen. But so welcome to this week's episode of the show. I say this week's episode on the Thursday show often, and I don't know why, because this is our second episode of the week. But we will be going over a preview of the 49ers game for the divisional matchup of the NFC Playoffs. We will be bringing on Kyle Posey of Niners Nation here in just a minute. But before we do, just want to thank you guys so much for listening and enjoying the show, spreading links on it about it on social media, whether you are donating to the show via Patreon at patreon.com/NorseCode or over at PayPal for paypal.me/NorseCode. Again, thank you guys so much. We do have a new Patreon donor to mention here. He just has the clever name of the Walrus and the Carpenter. He is giving at the $3.50 range. Thank you guys so much. Appreciate that quite a bit. Again, if you'd like to donate to the show, if you hear value in what we do, you can go to patreon.com/NorseCode, or you can go to paypal.me/NorseCode as well. Before we start with the preview of the game, I just wanted to mention my favorite part of the Saints game that I totally forgot last episode. And I don't know if you have seen the replays or if you've seen the pictures on Twitter, Arif, but the Saints fans flipping off the camera after the extra point that the Vikings put in, I will admit I did a spit take while sitting in my chair.
Oh my God. It's like they're in the stadium and they're taking like wow.
I enjoyed that. I thought that was New Orleans classy right there. I had a pretty good moment at that. I enjoyed that thoroughly, and for about the next 20 minutes on Twitter, that was the thing that people were screenshotting and sending out. So I wanted to salute those particular fans. You had your moment, and by God, you did it. So that is going to be it for our little intro. We are going to go now into a preview of the divisional round of the playoffs here with Kyle Posey of Niners Nation.
All right, I'm here with Kyle Posey, lifelong Niners fan and producer over at Niners Nation, the SB Nation site covering the 49ers. How you doing, Kyle?
I'm doing great, man. We've worked really hard for this all of our life, so I'm glad that the 49ers are finally able to make the playoffs after 5 years.
All right, so the Vikings heading over to the 49ers over in Santa Clara, not San Francisco. Google Maps tells me it's 40 minutes away. My understanding is that it's 2 hours away during traffic. That's kind of weird, right?
It's really weird. And you see when opposing teams come in like, oh, I see all these people in San Francisco. Like, okay, that's great. The game's not played there. Nobody cares.
All right. Well, let's talk about the 49ers. The consensus seems to be that they might be the best team in the NFC. I think after the Saints got bounced by some team, don't remember, the 49ers probably are the best team in the NFC. Does that kind of meet your estimation? Are you a little bit worried about that kind of label being attached to them? What are your thoughts on that?
No, I do think that they are the best team remaining in the NFC. I think the Saints pose the biggest threat, so I think that's why it's a lot more easier for us 49ers fans to say that. But I mean, it's not like Minnesota is. I also think at the same time Minnesota is kind of being underrated at this point. I don't think people understand that in the playoffs, guys win games. These like Derrick Henry, like guys can take over and win games. Adam Thielen, like these guys can take over and win games. And Minnesota has so many talented players, Danielle Hunter, that they can just wreck whatever you're doing.
Yeah, well, let's talk about that matchup. Danielle Hunter's going to be going up against Mike McGlinchey, who I was kind of surprised at the pick. I thought he was kind of overdrafted, but my understanding is he's played pretty well in San Francisco, and then Joe Staley, a perennial Pro Bowler, seems to have fallen off a little bit, but he doesn't seem like, when you compare him to the rest of the tackles around the league, it doesn't seem like he's playing poorly. He's just not playing up to the standard that we kind of normally expect. What are your evaluation of these tackles?
I think they are playing pretty well. I think that you see a sack, and in a fan's mind, once a guy gives up a sack, he's just worthless. Like he's not going to have a good game. And we see Joe Staley give up a sack early in a game, and then fans will just continue to think that he's playing poorly. But he's played actually really well, especially over the second half of the season. McGlinchey has as well. I believe McGlinchey's only allowed 2 sacks over the second half of the season, and he struggled at first, but that was due to injury. And I just think the running game has helped them get going as well. But what we're going to see, because, Griffin and Hunter, there are two different beasts that, these guys have seen. So it'll be a really good matchup. And I just wrote about the X factors for the 49ers, and McGlinchey is one of them, because if like the one person that can really ruin what they're going to do on offense is Danielle Hunter.
So what do you see about that matchup that you think might worry you about? Like, is it Hunter's skill set? Is it his level of production over the past couple of weeks? What about it makes you think, hey, this might be a difficult day for McGlinchey, other than, hey, it's Danielle Hunter?
Right. I think that Hunter's just, what's the best way to put this? A guy just keeps coming after you over and over and over. Like, that's Hunter, where you're going to be in for a long day. And he seems like he's the type of guy that if he gets sort of the upper hand early, it's going to be a long day. And McGlinchey's sort of the same way, where if he doesn't get off to a good start, he usually doesn't play very well. And Hunter's probably going to be one of the better, if not the best, edge rusher he's seen all season. So I think it's a little bit of all of it. The skill set specifically, though, just his strength and obviously length and athleticism are probably going to give McGlinchey trouble.
Sure. Well, last week, the Vikings went up against a pair of super talented tackles. They decided, never mind. They put their most talented pass rushers against the interior offensive line in New Orleans, which has been a problem for them all year. I would argue that the 49ers, especially because, they don't have Weston Richburg, their interior offensive line has also been a pretty significant issue all year, especially compared to the tackles. If the Vikings decide to kind of move Griffin and Hunter to the inside, once again, on these passing downs, do you think that presents kind of a matchup issue again for San Francisco?
That's a good question. I don't, because the 49ers, especially if they roll with Daniel Brunskill, who he played right tackle. He was a swing tackle. He's really the fifth tackle on the team, but he's played really well. He's an undrafted free agent. He was with Kyle Shanahan in Atlanta. He played right guard, and he just has been lights out playing right guard. And then you have Laken Tomlinson, who is a very, very good pass protector. He just doesn't really get beat in pass protection. So, yeah, while that worked against the Saints, I don't think that is the best way to beat the 49ers.
Yeah, fair enough. Well, let's talk about, so, the big discussion in analytics Twitter right now, we're talking about pass protection. A lot of people that are talking about kind of the way that pass protection works is that when we log sack numbers and pressure numbers and so on, a lot of that is owned by the quarterback. Jimmy Garoppolo, who has the fastest release in the league and therefore has a tool in his toolbox to kind of avoid sacks, still has a somewhat high sack rate at 7%. Does he hold on to the ball a little bit? What are the opportunities for the Vikings defensive line to put pressure here? Does Garoppolo kind of exacerbate them, or does he kind of make up for it with awareness in the pocket, getting rid of the ball super quickly when he does decide to throw it, and so on?
His awareness, his pocket presence in general, it's been hot and cold. There are some games where he's just on it, like you mentioned, the quick release. But there are other games, like there's a couple instances against the Rams, and even to a lesser extent the Seahawks, where he's just holding the ball. He's not kind of trusting. He's not trusting what he sees, and that's when it usually leads to bad things. But I really do think, overall in the grand scheme of things, he's done really well, and he does get rid of the ball very fast, and he keeps the offense ahead of schedule and on pace. So I imagine there will be plenty of screens and short throws and just, end arounds, motion, to all these different types of things to slow down the edge rushers for the Vikings.
Yeah, so despite, a somewhat high sack rate, Jimmy Garoppolo is 6th in the league in net yards per attempt, which even incorporates sacks into the way they determine their statistic. A lot of that has to do with his efficiency through the air, which I think has gone kind of underrated. He's got 8.4 yards per attempt. A lot of people like to focus on, the interception number, which is not, great or anything like that. But when you kind of combine it with the rest of this offense, he's 3rd in yards per attempt behind Ryan Tannehill and Matthew Stafford, two apparently MVP candidates had they been able to play, the full season. So Garoppolo, of all players who have played at least 14 games, has the highest yards per attempt in the NFL. Do you feel like he's off the radar? Why is no one talking about Garoppolo, the quarterback, and they're just talking about Shanahan, the offense?
Well, a lot of it is Shanahan, and he does. So, okay, you have to execute, and that does matter. So Garoppolo is very accurate down the field, and Sports Info, and we're just talking about completion percentage, but he has completed 59% of his passes, which is 10% higher than the next closest quarterback on just passes that travel 20 yards down the field. He also has the highest touchdown percentage. But these guys, for the most part, are running wide open. Like Kyle Shanahan does a magnificent job of just scheming guys open, whether it's running guys off and getting a corner route wide open, or just different sort of crossing routes that just manipulates the defense's coverage. And I imagine against the Vikings, who are, a heavy quarters team, just what Zimmer does, like we're going to see a lot of that as well. But Garoppolo, he does what he's supposed to do. There are times where he has just some brilliant throws where he throws guys open as well, but it's just easy to, give Shanahan the majority of the credit when you see guys running open continuously.
So if there is maybe an Achilles heel in Garoppolo's game, it's the turnovers, not just the interception rate, which at 2.7% is one of the higher ones in the league, something like 8th highest of all quarterbacks that qualify. Plus, there's also 10 fumbles this year, which feels very Cousins-esque. How have these turnovers have come about? Is it sometimes complex defenses force him to wait a little bit and he doesn't he gets the ball out and people can kind of see where it's going? Is it he's holding onto the ball that causes fumbles? Are they bouncing off receivers' hands? What are the nature of these interceptions?
Yeah, there was a string there where the receivers just couldn't catch the ball and they were just deflecting, carrying off their hands and bouncing right into the defender's hands. But with that said, there are probably, you can name 10 throws where the defender just didn't. 10 might be exaggerating, but there were a handful of throws for sure where the defenders just didn't catch the ball. So he was putting the ball in harm's way, and he did get away from that towards the end of the season. He's gotten much better, but I do think the fumbles and just the sack rate are definitely on him. He, like we mentioned, just with his pocket presence, he's holding on to the ball too long, and he just went through a spell where he just wasn't seeing the field well. And that really hurt the offense. But as I mentioned, just the last few games, he's just played really well, and he's been really on schedule, and he's getting the ball out of his hands. And I think that's what Shanahan's attempting to do. Just so, the longer he holds on the ball, the worse he gets. And that's probably with any quarterback.
Yeah. So, maybe part of that also has to do with kind of the emergence of this receiving core. Emmanuel Sanders, they traded for partway through the season. Deebo Samuel, rookie, who seemed to really catch on against Seattle in week 10. And then since then has been a persistent threat. I think one of a number of rookie receivers this year that have gotten 800 yards or more for the full season. What do you think about this receiving core? How does it look different than it did in week 1?
Yeah, it's Emmanuel Sanders for sure. And it's not that he's making an impact in the box score. I think he's just teaching these young receivers how to play football, just how to get open. Because we saw earlier in the season, Deebo Samuel really didn't know how to run. Like he knew how to run routes, but he didn't know how to use, pace and tempo and how to separate. And since Emmanuel Sanders has come on board, him and Kendrick Bourne have just become incredibly reliable for this offense. I think Samuel it's pretty clear that he's going to be a star in this league. Just having Sanders around has really helped him. So, yeah, I think that a lot of the credit goes to Sanders.
So in this receiving core, it doesn't seem like, a lot of receiving cores, you feel like either they've got kind of this one consistent theme, like in Tampa Bay, they've kind of got this jump ball mentality, whereas other receiving cores, they've got, this diversity of talent and skill sets. So like, in the Chargers with Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, and so on. It feels like the 49ers don't quite have a bunch of the same kind of receiver, but at the same time, it also doesn't seem like they've got a ton of different styles of receiver either. It feels like they've got, a Venn diagram of skill sets, but not ones that kind of capture every skill set you might want in a receiving core. Are there holes in the way the receiving core plays? Does George Kittle kind of make up for the difference? Or am I evaluating this wrong? Or you got every type?
No, so Shanahan actually has a pretty specific style of receiver, and I wrote about this when I back before the season started. So he really likes guys that he has a benchmark. So if you run under pretty much a sub 7.3 cone is what he has, and then he has the agility drills in the 40 as well. 40 not nearly as important, but what he's really looking for is just uber shifty guys. So guys that are really quick, he can throw the ball too, and they can make you miss. Like that's what his style of receiver is. Guys that can get open quick underneath, whether it's screens, whether it's slants, whether it's curls and outs, just on these quick routes. So that's really what the style of receiver that he likes is.
Fair enough. What happened to Dante Pettis?
Dante Pettis forgot to work hard this offseason, and Kyle Shanahan is going to keep him in the doghouse for the entire season. That's seriously what it seemed like happened. He's been making quotes about Pettis since training camp started, and it seemed like he was trying to just bring the best out of him, and I think it had the opposite effect. And he gave Pettis plenty of opportunities, even with injuries. Pettis played, but he just wasn't consistent. I don't know what happened to him, because as a rookie, he was very impressive. Crazy releases off the line of scrimmage, made some spectacular catches, made some great plays after the catch, and all that just went away. In training camp, there were just the beat reporters, just all the beat writers that were covering the 49ers, they were very adamant that if a hand gets laid on Pettis, he's going to drop the ball. For lack of better words, they were just calling him soft. And that's what it seemed like was happening during the regular season. He just could not hold on to the ball, and he couldn't separate. He just doesn't look like the same player. He was battling injuries through training camp. He had a hip. He also had an ankle, I believe. And I think he just never was able to recover. And hopefully next offseason, we see more of the rookie version of Pettis, but I don't think we're going to see much of him in the playoffs.
Yeah, fair enough. You mentioned they got a prototype receiver. They also seem to have a prototype at running back, which is super athlete. Unfortunately, Jerick McKinnon not available with the 49ers. Again, you've got Tevin Coleman, Raheem Mostert, Matt Breida, Jeff Wilson sometimes. What is the shape of this running back core? What do they like to do? Well, everyone knows about the wide zone that Shanahan likes to run, but I feel like there's maybe a little bit more here. What distinguishes the running backs? What makes them so excellent in this system? And why does the running game seem like sometimes it's the engine of this offense?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think the 49ers running backs track team, just think 4x100. These guys can go, and they can go in a hurry. And if you just look at their 40 times, I believe they're all sub 4.4. Mostert ran a 10-100, which is unreal. Jesus. I don't know if you follow track, but
yeah.
Yeah, essentially, if he wanted to, he could probably go into the Olympics, which is unreal to say out loud. But more other than speed, he has patience. He has really good patience, but I think they are better after contact than most people give them credit for. They do a really good job of breaking tackles. I don't know if speed helps them with that, just the force and able to stay on their feet, whatever it is, but they're really good after contact, and I think that helps them get the big play. We've seen Brady cut back a couple times, and we've seen Mostert do it often where, they read the hole, somebody gets them, they run through an arm tackle, and then it's just off to the races. So their balance and speed is probably the two main things.
If we were to kind of parse out credit for kind of the how effective this running game has been, how much would you say is schematic with Shanahan's scheme? How much would you say it's the individual talent of these running backs? How much would you say has to do with how well the offensive line blocks?
Yeah, so I think it's the best of all worlds. So with what they do on offense and with injuries, they actually had to move more to like a man power scheme towards the middle of the season. And that just wasn't this team at all. So now that they're healthy again, we've seen more wide zone, and it just allows the offense to not, have to be superheroes. They don't have to block an Aaron Donald. They don't have to block a Grady Jarrett to be successful. And that's really helped them just, block as a unit. But it's a scheme, but it's also, having George Kittle and Kyle Juszczyk be two of the better players at their position. I think those two probably deserve more credit than anybody. Just some of the blocks that they're able to execute and make. They're not easy by any means, by any stretch of the imagination, but those two bury guys, and then that's when you see the small crease and the speed show up from the running backs.
Yeah, there's a reason I saved those two for last. They might be my favorite players at their positions in the NFL. They're the most versatile players in the NFL at their positions. When they signed Juszczyk from Baltimore, a lot of people were like, man, you're paying a lot of money for a fullback. Juszczyk was injured for a couple of games this season. It felt like that, in the games that he wasn't there, made a significant difference. George Kittle is more efficient than almost every receiver in yards per route run as a receiver. He's a devilishly good run blocker. And it reminds me of, the 2010 New England Patriots when they had Gronkowski and that other tight end. I don't really want to talk about too much, but they'd line up and they'd see what defense the opponent was in, and then check into, a run if it was nickel and a pass if it was base. It feels like the 49ers have that opportunity with Juszczyk, who's so excellent in the passing game. George Kittle is so good in the running game. And obviously, like you mentioned, vice versa, they've got, the chops to block really well and to catch the ball really well. What do those two do for the offense? And, how do the 49ers kind of execute this offense around a pair of kind of unusual skill players?
Yeah, so I'll start with Juice because Kyle Shanahan is going to use a fullback. He's made that very clear. And they run what's called a sift zone. Wanda Sift is the name. Not that matters, but he's going to basically sift out whoever is unblocked on the defensive line and kind of go against the grain, against the weak side, or go from the strong side to the weak side of the formation and either cut the defensive end or just kick out the linebacker. It looks very easy, but what he has to do just going across the formation like that is not easy at all. But even in the passing game, they use Juszczyk and they use him down the field. And actually, I saw what he did week 1 in 2018, where the Vikings kind of just left him uncovered, and teams kind of forget about him down the field, and the 49ers always seem to find a way to hit him down the field. But as far as Kittle, man, he's the best player on the team. There's no other way to put it. He does pretty much everything. And I am wondering if we see kind of a Derrick Henry type effect where, at this point of the season, guys do not want to tackle a guy that big, that fast. So I'm wondering if we see a heavy dose of Kittle where he's just running over dudes left and right. But Kittle does everything, man. He, like, from a run blocking standpoint to even pass pro, they have used him against Cam Jordan, for example, and one-on-one, and he holds his own against whoever it is. It's pretty impressive, man. I don't know. We're running out of superlatives to describe Kittle, but he makes the offense go. That's for sure.
Now we're heading into Gronk territory with him. Used to be kind of blasphemous to compare anyone to Gronk, but Kittle is something else, dude. All right, well, let's talk about this defense. Seems to be kind of the better of the two units. The defense has been pretty excellent. I love Fred Warner. Obviously, that defensive line is incredible. You've got Nick Bosa, who's almost certainly going to win Defensive Rookie of the Year. You've got DeForest Buckner, Eric Armstead. Maybe could have seen a little bit more out of Solomon Thomas this year. Would have been nice. But just an incredible front. And then on the back end, you've got, I think Richard Sherman has played better than Stephon Gilmore this year. He might be, actually, I voted for him in the Athletics voting for Defensive Player of the Year. He's played pretty incredibly. And then you've got, the set of secondary players around him. What do you think the strength of this defense is? Also, was I too aggressive voting for him?
That is high praise. So I think Richard Sherman has played very well. I don't think he's played as well as, he's getting credit for.
Wow, too bad for me.
Well, I mean, everybody thinks that because you see these numbers and Richard Sherman is going to tell you he's played well. So whenever PFF is tweeting out these, coverage yards per snap, of course he's going to retweet them. But no, he's played well. He's been great. I think the strength of this team has to be up front, though. I would honestly think Eric Armstead was the best player on the defense this year. And that's not, the super popular opinion, but everybody that has watched the 49ers acknowledges what he means to the defense just because he can win both inside and out. And when they're at their best, when D Ford is healthy, they can go Ford, Bosa, Buckner, Armstead, and teams just don't have a chance because they can get after you with 4 while keeping 7 in the secondary. But like you mentioned, Fred Warner, man, he's great. He just sniffs out routes that he makes plays where he has no business being around the ball. And his PFF grade is a lot lower than it should be just because, he's not getting credit for taking away the routes because it's not being thrown. I think Jimmy Ward's been really good. Their safety's been really good. Jaquiski Tartt, he's going to be back, and he has not played since a month, essentially. And we saw the 49ers coverage take a big step back because they had to kind of go more vanilla when he was out. So that'll be a big change, and hopefully, we see a difference there on Saturday. But honestly, and we talk about this a lot, whether it's, scheme, talent, and, Robert Saleh getting a job, but they have 11 good players on defense. That's why they're so good.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask about Tartt and the fact that the defense seems to have fallen off in the past 4 weeks. I think they were positive in expected points added by a defense every week except for against the Cardinals of all teams. And then in the final 4 weeks of the season, they had negative expected points as a defense. Do you think that's entirely because of Tartt's absence?
I think Tartt has a lot to do with that because what they do in third down and especially in the red zone, they get into these man match and zone match coverages where when he was out, they had to go back to single high Seattle is what I'll call it, where you just in the red zone, you're just opening yourself up to all these different routes and just leaving guys one-on-one. And other teams took advantage of that. So with Tartt being back, I think we'll see a lot more too high looks where, the defense is more even and you're able to account for more receivers. So obviously it's not all on Tartt, but he has a lot to do with it.
Well, yeah. So let's talk about the schematic side of things. So Saleh, a lot of people think, people who come from the Pete Carroll tree just implement cover 3, kind of no matter what. But, we didn't really see that in Dallas. It doesn't seem like we're seeing that in San Francisco. When everyone's healthy, what do they? You say there's a lot of too high. Does that mean cover 2? Does that mean cover 4? Does that mean cover 6? What does too high look like? From play to play, and how often do they change up these coverages?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think Joe Woods, who came over from Denver, implemented a lot of these man matching and zone matching coverage principles. And I don't think Saleh should get the credit, but he is. But yeah, I think Joe Woods is the real reason here. But when I say too high, you'll see a lot of quarters, cover 4 type principles, but there is a lot of cover 6 as well. And I think that's when they're at their best, when, they're just kind of matching in. If a guy goes short, the corner will jump that route. And they've been very aggressive in that. And they've been very good tackling as well. I think that's probably where Richard Sherman doesn't get as much credit as he should. But yeah, too high, we're going to see a lot of Tartt jumping down or rotating at the snap, along with Ward. They're very interchangeable. I think that allows them. That's what make them play so at a high level earlier in the season, because the replacement, Marcel Harris, he's more of like a strong safety box traditional type. And in these coverages, he just wasn't able to see the field like Tart did. Tart's awareness is just through the roof. He recognizes routes. And I imagine, knowing what Minnesota likes to do just as far as the play action boots, that is actually a strength of just the linebackers and the safeties.
Well, so let's talk a little bit about those linebackers. You already mentioned Fred Warner, who maybe doesn't get a ton of credit. Dre Greenlaw, I think we heard his name called 8 million times against Seattle. And then from my memory, he actually played all right the week prior, but there hasn't been a ton of discussion surrounding him. He hasn't gotten, I think he got a ton of snaps week 1, and then he didn't get a ton of snaps until halfway through the season. What is this overall? What this linebacking core look like? What are the weaknesses? How do people tend to attack them? And then, what does it contribute to, how excellent this defense has been?
Oh, the difference in linebackers from this season to last season is probably the reason. Obviously, the defensive line helps, but just the added athleticism that they were able to get with Greenlaw, and then obviously Quan Alexander, who will play, and that will be a big difference. So getting Quan back, getting Greenlaw on the field, and just being able to play with those two, they're able to get to plays that a lot of players can't get to. I think, I don't mean to keep harping on just their athleticism, but their ability to just sniff out plays as well. Fred Warner and Quan Alexander, really good awareness, but also really aggressive. You see some linebackers kind of, play cat and mouse with offensive linemen, but these guys just go full speed into you, and it really puts the pressure on the offense to perform. And I think their aggressiveness and athleticism is really stood out.
And then we'll go back to the front. You mentioned that you think that the best aspect of this team is kind of what they do up front. It feels like, among defensive interior players, Buckner doesn't get maybe as much credit as and it might be just his history. He hasn't played at a consistent level, I think, for the 49ers, but he's played really well. And then, like you mentioned, you got Eric Armstead and Nick Bosa. It feels like these players, the three of those, might be in the top 10 of their position, but they don't have quite enough in their resume to legitimately argue that they're Pro Bowl snubs at the same time. Altogether, well, maybe Nick Bosa, but altogether, they've got this incredible ability to generate pressure. They've been really great against the run. What about the construction of this group makes it so excellent? Is there a consistent theme when they're all long, or is it, the incredible athleticism they all have? What about them as a group makes them so difficult for teams to pass, protect, and run block against?
I think that as far as just the run game goes, they're just stronger than the guy that they're going against. Like their strength is unreal. I think they're also very good with their hands. Armstead and Bosa specifically, they just win the hand battle, and they get into the backfield. So they get their hands on the offensive lineman first, they get past them, and then that's all she wrote. But as far as just passing goes, I think it's the best of all worlds. So you have Buckner's strength, you have Bosa's handwork, and then you have Armstead is very nimble and quick for a guy his size, and I think that catches a lot of linemen off guard. So you get all these guys going at one time, and then now D Ford's going to come back. He hasn't played since New Orleans. He actually played only 4 snaps in New Orleans, but he really hasn't played a game since week 11. So with a hamstring strain, so he's back, and there's a pretty crazy stat out there. So when D Ford is on the field, the Niners had 24 sacks on 164 snaps when Bosa and Ford were both on the field. They had 24 sacks on 801 snaps on all the other plays. It's just a terror when Ford is on the field because he has the speed to come off and complement those power guys. So you get 4 guys, and you can't double them, and that's what makes them so difficult.
All right. Is there anything about the special teams unit, as we kind of just move on and finish out looking at this roster, anything about the special teams unit that strikes you as particularly noteworthy? I know Robbie Gould is still in the NFL, and that is kind of shocking. He seems like he's built kind of, if kickers got into the Hall of Fame, maybe a Hall of Fame case. But Mitch Wishnowsky, great name at punter. What about the special teams unit, helps or hurts the 49ers? Or are they just kind of an average unit?
Yeah, I feel like so Gold was struggled early on in the season, but once they got their long snapper back, I think it was around week 9. He's only missed one kick since, so he's been pretty automatic since then. I think the return game has a chance to make some noise here. Obviously, Richie James isn't on the level that Deontay Harris is. First of all, sidebar, what does he run? Like a 4.2? Why is he so fast and why is he so difficult to stop? Because that dude is something else,
man. Oh my God.
But I think that Richie James should have a chance to make some plays here. He's been pretty under the radar just as far as, flipping the field for the 49ers. He's made some plays and he might even get some touches on offense, but I think he has a chance to be an underrated, unsung hero, X factor, whatever you want to call him. But yeah, other than that, they've been pretty average. The punter got off to a good start. He was a rookie. They took a punter in the 4th round, by the way. But he's been kind of just whatever. So he hasn't really made much of a difference. He has a leg, and I'm sure that it would be great to pin Cousins inside the 10. But yeah, other than that, the coverage teams they're fine. They're good, but there's nothing to write home about. I think that the biggest issue here would be, the biggest advantage would be if James can get going on a punt, or if he can just get past the 35, a time or two on kickoffs.
What as we kind of close out the segment, what matchups aside from the Danielle Hunter, Mike McGlinchey matchup you mentioned earlier in the show, what matchups kind of worry you the most? What matchups are you kind of salivating? Watching the 49ers.
So I don't know how you guard Adam Thielen. I've always felt like he's been one of the 5 best receivers in the NFL just the last few years. And looking at him when he's healthy, he's just very tough to stop because he moves all over the place. He's not in one spot, and they do a good job of using him all over the field. So I'll be interested to see, what the 49ers plan is to stop Thielen, because he's just a difficult dude to stop, man. Obviously, you have both edge rushers. That'll be difficult. I'm interested to see how the team defends Kyle Rudolph in, I would say the red zone area, just that part of the field, or even on 3rd and short situations. But the 49ers have been good overall against tight ends this season. So, that has a lot to do with Warner and Quan Alexander. As far as salivating, this has to be come out. I think this game is going to be a lot like the 49ers Saints game, where Shanahan knows he has an advantage and he's going to come out and throw it all over the place. Not having Mike Hughes and Mac Alexander. So first of all, how confident are you in Sendejo or whoever is playing slot? Who is going to be the slot corner for the Vikings?
I'm not super confident that Sendejo will reprise his role. He played remarkably well against the Saints. We'll see. But it's possible that he reprises his role. I'm a little surprised we didn't see Jaron Kearse, who is the tallest nickel in the league by probably 5 inches. He's been pretty good in the nickel, and he has remarkable quickness for his size. We'll kind of see. I would not be shocked if they decided that Jaron Kearse and George Kittle were the matchup just to have length there. But in the nickel, man, maybe it's Sendejo again. It's if he pulls out a second game as a solid nickel corner, that would be pretty remarkable. At some point, I would not be shocked if the Vikings were thinking, I don't know, we just signed Marcus Sherrills, and technically he is a nickel corner, I guess. So that's a good question.
Please.
It's a good question. I have no idea what the nickel corner solution, because it's not Holton Hill. He's too big. I have no idea.
So that's the matchup that I would be salivating at if I was the 49ers. Yeah, and I imagine Shanahan is going to attack. We saw against Seattle, and we saw a little bit against the Rams, but more so against Seattle, where he busted out some RPOs, some new RPOs, where they're just faking like they're running wide zone, and we have a slot receiver, Deebo Samuel, running a slant, or Kittle running just a quick over route, and there's nobody there because, you have some success on the ground, which play action is going to work no matter what. But when you do the little RPOs, they're going to bite. Like the second level players are going to bite, and yeah, there's just so much space. And I imagine that we're going to see a lot of RPOs and just a lot more tempo and pace to spread it out, get Anthony Barr one-on-one with a receiver because Mike Zimmer loves that. And yeah, I think they're just going to throw the ball a lot and have some success against that. It's just a matter of executing and, if they can slow down the pass rush, really. But yeah, the matchup against the Vikings secondary has to be the key here.
Yeah, well, whoever said that passing won in the NFL. The over-under has moved down to 44.5 from opening at 46. The line is 7 in favor of San Francisco. I think they opened at 5.5, maybe 6. So money's on San Francisco. With a couple things we didn't mention. Some people seem to think the Vikings play poorly on grass. There is some evidence to maybe suggest that. I don't really buy it. But the Vikings do play poorly when traveling westward, especially all the way to the West Coast. And the San Francisco 49ers have a bye week. Plus, they are clearly healthier than the Vikings, just taking a look at the injury report. Plus, they got a player back from IR. A lot of things in play here. Feels like structurally it's set up against Minnesota. What are your thoughts on kind of the final score?
Yeah, I think that the 49ers have a good chance. Just when I was looking at some numbers when Shanahan has a bye, and he's scored like 4 touchdowns when he's had I think it was 3 games just going back to 2015 when he's had excess time to prepare. His points were like 38, 28, 29, just he's going to score some points. So my score prediction for this one, I think the 49ers get off to a hot start. I think that the Vikings are able to answer, and I think that there is going to be a turnover, and then everything that Kirk Cousins did this season is going to be wiped away because he made a turnover. And my final prediction is 30-21.
All right, so they cover and hit the over. All right, thanks so much, man. Is there anything you want to plug?
No, I will be writing about this game in depth ad nauseum, just like you. So nope, NinersNation.com. Go there.
All right. Thanks so much, man.
All right, before we go into the mailbag, one thing I wanted to mention last episode, but we were running long, so we just kind of moved it over to this one, is kind of discussing the rest of the playoffs. And the first thing that we could bring up is that the Eagles were in fact knocked out after they had, I want to say, how many starters really were playing that game for them? Like 3 on offense. The Eagles were in fact knocked out by the Seahawks in a relatively boring game.
Yeah, that was the most normal of the games, which is surprising because it's the Seahawks game and they tend to be kind of weird. But on the other hand, like, it always felt like the Seahawks were just in control. Like, the only reason they only scored 19 points or 17 points or whatever was because the Eagles only scored 9. So, like, they just, like, if the Eagles found a way to score like 25, the Seahawks could have just as easily scored 29. Like, it just feels like they just kind of kept up to keep up,
Yeah, and I was having trouble watching it after the Vikings game simply because the win by the Vikings was such like this relief moment that why would I continue to watch football after that for the rest of the day? Like, it was difficult. I had to rewatch it last night when it was playing on NFL Network. Coincidentally, they also played the Vikings game on that, and I sat and watched that too. But that was after Wentz went out, there was just this. Oh, okay. Well, there is absolutely no chance for the Eagles to end up winning that.
What are you talking about? They put the best quarterback in the game.
Yes. Well, it felt like the complete lack of playmakers. McCown was let down by the lack of playmakers. Yeah,
I agree.
McCown has played with such greats as Brandon
Marshall, Alshon Jeffrey.
He handed off to Emmitt Smith at one point.
Good Lord, that's true. Knocked the Vikings out doing that. Goodness.
Emmitt Smith. He has a connection to handing off to Emmitt Smith.
That's wild.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's thrown to like every big-bodied receiver that Tampa Bay has had. Like, I think he's thrown to both VJax and Mike Evans, maybe? I don't know.
Probably.
Good.
I bet he even managed to hand off to Cadillac Williams. Back when that was a thing. He went to the shop quickly. Also, the Titans managed to end Tom Brady and likely end the Brady Belichick era, but I find it hard to believe that Brady is going to end up playing with New England next year.
Yeah, so I find this like interesting. So I think after the game, what I find actually the most interesting is how we all kind of just agreed, like, oh wow, this might be the end of it. Like everyone came to like kind of, no one was like, I don't know, like, Brady played well. He didn't have the skill makers that he wanted. PFF had him as like the 8th or 12th best quarterback. He still got it, so, he means so much to the franchise. He's got such a close relationship, but everyone was just like, this might be it. So, which I find fascinating. I'm one of them, by the way. I'm not like, all you idiots are wrong. But like a couple days later, it just feels like it's less and less likely that this will be kind of the last moment. And not because, you can't end a career like that. Like, not everybody gets to go out like Peyton Manning did, kind of. Like, or Elway, right?
Yeah.
Most go out like Favre did, just like lying on the field and then like forced off the field, right? Like you
forcibly retired by the ice and a Chicago Bear. Right.
Like 99.99% of players, including great players, end careers involuntarily, right? Like, so, I don't think that's the reason. I think the reason is just, that actually there is that close relationship with Bob Kraft, which saved him from a Jimmy Garoppolo usurping, which looks like Belichick was right if that Seth Wickersham story is accurate, which a bunch of Patriots fans don't think is. I'll link it in the show notes. It's the one where Brady forced Garoppolo out to New England or to
San Francisco. Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that relationship makes it kind of unique because otherwise Belichick does tend to move on from players pretty quickly and easily. But also, I mean, so Brady becomes a free agent. I think that he signed with New England for cheaper than he would sign with anywhere else. Like I think if he goes to like the Chargers, which a lot of people bring up because Rivers is probably retiring, and also they've got receivers, and also he is from California and might want to go back to California.
And seat licenses for the new stadium on the San Diego side are at an absolute nil. Like nobody's buying them.
Right. So, some people are bringing that, but like, I feel like he would extort the Chargers for the amount of money he's actually worth on the market. And I think with New England, that's not the case. So, I think that's another reason. And then it just, it doesn't feel like something, Brady would do, right? I feel like he thinks he's got another year. And if he thinks he's got another year, I'm pretty sure New England's going to give him a chance. Plus, New England doesn't have like a quarterback in waiting, right?
Right.
They had one, and then they flipped him for a second-round pick. So,
they had a couple over the years that they have since gotten rid of. And the one thing that, the one team that not a lot of people are mentioning that has said that they're looking for a quarterback, Indianapolis.
Indy would be amazing. Just like for the storylines. Like, yeah, they've got a great team. They've got a pretty good receiving core. They've got a phenomenal offensive line, which the Chargers definitely don't have. Mm-hmm. They've got a great coach. They've got a good defense. Man.
It's Kobe saying, I want to win a championship without Shaq.
Right. That would be so, because it would be like, so Belichick had kind of his year without Brady going 11-5 or whatever. And so you can always point to that and say, Belichick doesn't need Brady. We've never seen Brady without Belichick. Let's see Brady with Frank Reich.
Mm.
I would imagine like Colts fans would be torn about this, right? Kind of like Vikings fans were torn about Favre. In fact, I can't think of a better analogy than that.
That's pretty apt right there.
Yeah. So, but like once it happens, they're all in, right? Like it's one of those, I don't know, you can't like debase yourself. It's such a big part of the rivalry. And also all those mean things about Brady I said for the past 20 years, I still think them. And then he joins the team and you're like, I'm all in. Let's go, baby.
Do they take down that banner?
The
participation banner?
Brady would force them to take down that banner. That's embarrassment.
I want that so badly. I want Brady in Indianapolis. That would be so much fun to watch. And I'm convinced that the Favre thing in Minnesota Minnesota fans weren't really sold on him until I believe it was week 3 with the 49ers throw.
Yeah, 49ers, yeah.
And that was it. That was all they needed. And for the rest of the year, it was Favre. We have a chance. We can win. We can do whatever. I wonder how long it would take.
That throw was to somebody who ended up being like the Eagles wide receiver coach. My head wants to say Greg Camarillo, but it's not.
No, it's Greg Lewis.
Greg Lewis, that's it. Yeah. Dwight Clark, right? That's what I said.
Yeah. Wow. I want to see what it takes for Brady to win over the Indianapolis fans. Like, because it's with the Vikings, it was like everybody knew that he was like a once in a lifetime talent. Okay, fine. At the same time, dude, we've hated you for like over a decade and a half. Nearly 2 decades.
So hard. But like I would imagine that Colts fans would do the turn that Vikings fans did, which until, the fact that a Super Bowl never happened, which is to say, he had his best season in a Vikings uniform. Vikings legend Brett Favre. Like, that's the whole thing. It's part of the troll. I would have to imagine, Colts fans to do the same. The problem is, it's like way easier for a Vikings fan to do that because their last good quarterback was like Fran Tarkenton. And so there's no one's like overshadowing the legacy of like whoever the Vikings Peyton Manning would be. That's the only like problem there is like if Brady wins one in Indianapolis, you're like, well, but Manning was still better and more important, right?
Yeah, there weren't a lot of people comparing Favre to Dante Culpepper, except for me when I was saying that he was going to have some terrible end of the game interception, and I'd just been waiting for it like you could with Dante Culpepper. It seemed like it was going to happen like clockwork every game that they were down. Maybe. Also, the Texans defeated the Bills despite a hilarious lateral by Josh Allen.
Oh my God. How did that not work? Yeah, I can't believe that. So that was the game that I missed a lot of. I ended up watching significant parts of it afterwards. I can't believe people were gassing up Josh Allen because I was like on the plane, right? And people are like, "Yeah, Josh Allen's pretty good," and I'm like, "I don't believe you."
You land and like, wait, he did what?
Yeah, right? It was wild.
He lateraled to who?
So Ian Kenyon. So I make fun of him all the time on Twitter. I want to say that this time I make fun of him. It's not really about him so much as it is the general attitude that was embodied by the tweet that he sent out. Which is a lot of people are like, hey, we made fun of Josh Allen, said he was an awful pick, that he's the worst quarterback you could have picked there. And honestly, I feel like, people don't want to acknowledge it, but, he's played up to, he's exceeded expectations and he's played really well. And I was like, that's not true. What is happening in this game for people to like forget the whole season? Like he's like the 27th best quarterback in the NFL.
The announcers, the guy who's not Booger was talking about how much, just how good he was, how well he was playing.
This is one thing we never talk about, I think, is that how much announcers like frame our understanding of football and of football players, because they reach, 40 million people. I reach 30,000, right? And so, like the difference between, 12 million people and 30,000 is about 12 million people. Like, they frame a lot of our understanding of football, which is why like primetime games correlate to Pro Bowl selections in ways that go beyond team talent, because obviously you select talented teams for primetime, but like their narrative creation in games, and they have to create narratives, it's their job, I'm not going to knock them for that, gives so much to the way people perceive things. That it's wild. So, I mean, that's always like, we never talk about that, but like that is so huge. What an impact they have, which is actually one reason that I think goes beyond what we've been saying about why Romo is such a good announcer, because I think he's pretty honest too. Like, it's not just that he, has this trick where he can identify the next play or anything like that, but he breaks things down in understandable ways. But also, like, he's pretty honest. He's just like, Dak's a really good quarterback, but man, today he doesn't have it. What a bad day, right? And it's, in this Josh Allen performance, I guess he drops, or he throws 3 turnover-worthy plays that should have been dropped, plus one, or they should have been caught by the defense, plus one that went right through J.J. Watt's hands.
Didn't show up in the box score. The box score didn't look good for him either, I guess, but like people were gassing him up. And then I got to see the Deshaun Watson highlights, and I'm like, they're on the same field, and you're talking about the other guy? Mm-hmm. God.
Yeah, it was. Well, the thing was, the Bills were leading for a good chunk of that game, so
that tells you who the good quarterback is.
Well, yes, in the same way that Kirk Cousins is responsible for all wins and losses of the Minnesota Vikings.
Can't get around it.
Yeah, it's totally a thing. So the 3 games this weekend are Titans at Ravens, Texans at Chiefs, and Seahawks at Packers. Should we go through a bit of a prediction of how badly the Ravens are going to destroy the Titans? I have a feeling starters are pulled by halftime.
Yeah, I'm a huge, the Titans are secretly a lot better than you think guy, because Tannehill's playing really well. But, I mean, the Ravens are favored by 10, and I don't think that's enough. I think they're 12-point favorites in my head. Ravens are going to kill them. And, the thing, Tannehill's been really good this year, and he deserves, obviously this is a contract year because he's a backup, right?
Yep.
And he deserves to be paid a very reasonable amount of money to compete for a starting job. I'm super happy because that's so cool. To be able to revive your career like that. I don't, one of the weaknesses I think he has is the very thing the Ravens are good at, which is sending more people at you than there are on the field. I swear to God, there's 13-person blitzes, by the Ravens. And they got when you get rid of the ball quickly, it's like you're throwing to Marcus Peters, great. So, I mean, that defense I think is kind of underrated, which is crazy because all we've talked about with the Ravens since 2001 is their defense, right? The year after they became the Ravens, they've been a defensive team. Flacco threw it deep or whatever, but now they're the most efficient offense in the league. They've got an expected points per play, record essentially. And they also set a rushing record that was true since 1978. They're amazing on offense, and we tend to forget that defense does all right for itself too. The Titans are boned.
Yeah, I'm trying to envision a scenario. Well, the reason why Tannehill's been able to be so effective is because Derrick Henry has been able to run the ball, and I can't see Derrick Henry running against this defense. Derrick Henry's really, really good, and they gashed the Patriots pretty well. I'm trying to envision a scenario that Derrick Henry is able to do the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a little bit less on that train. I think Tannehill's got his own, but there is a lot of play action to his game. I think almost 13 yards an attempt on play action or something like that. And Henry has been able to put them into very reasonable down and distance situations, so the third down percentage increases pretty dramatically, and that helps. But I do think Tannehill's done a lot on his own. But yeah, I think that they're a team that wants to have that complementary football and have, the running game and the passing game kind of work in concert with each other. And they're not going to have, I don't think, that running game work because, Henry wins a lot because, other teams that think they can hit can't hit, right? Because he is a unicorn. He's if you put, rockets on Brandon Jacobs, it's crazy. He's how LeGarrette Blount is a kick returner for some reason, and he's kind of good at it. It's that, but also he's fast. It's just wild. But the Ravens can actually hit. And so I don't know if that's going to be there for him. So I don't know. That's fascinating. But yeah, the Ravens offense is also it doesn't even the matchup on one side of the Titans offense and the Ravens defense, you can argue is kind of even, maybe favors the Ravens, maybe favors the Titans. I think it favors the Ravens. But the other matchup, the Ravens offense against that Titans defense, I mean, credit to Vrabel and everything, but that sounds like they're just going to get eviscerated.
Yeah, that doesn't sound like it's going to be good. I think we might have more to disagree with on the Texans and Chiefs though, because that is a very interesting matchup.
I'm curious what you're taking. I think the Chiefs maybe not run away with it, but I think the Chiefs have it because.
Do you think the Chiefs are allowed to have nice things at home at the playoffs? Really?
The Texans have one offensive lineman. I mean, they're forced to have 5 by rule, but they have one.
They have it's like those things where the guy is he's one person in the middle and then has straw people on the left and right.
Right, yeah.
he's actually a marionette. I'm not sure that the Chiefs Well, the Chiefs just have a terrible history of choking in situations like this. Not that the Texans are much better.
Right, I'm like, well, what's the Texans Super Bowl you're talking about?
I'm definitely not talking about a Texans Super Bowl at all. But I'm just trying to, I don't know, the Chiefs at home in the playoffs is not exactly a lock.
That's better than Texans on the road in the playoffs. Especially, you know, I think Will Fuller's still injured. It's just like the departed soul of DeAndre Hopkins, Deshaun Watson. I don't know.
Oh, snap, DeAndre Hopkins.
Well, like, yeah, the Texans don't have a defense. The Chiefs this year, contrary to popular belief, have a fairly average defense, which is probably enough to put pressure on Deshaun Watson. And then their offense, I mean, they're a more efficient offense than the Texans are. Plus, they get to be at home. I think this is the Chiefs, easy.
I think the Chiefs are able to pull it off, but I would not be surprised at all to see the Texans be able to eke this out and then just get roasted by the Ravens next week. And finally, we have the Seahawks attempting to defeat the worst 13-3 team in the league, the Packers.
I don't want to pick a winner because I'll either be lying or being accused of being a member of Seahawks Twitter.
Now, if an asteroid happens to hit Green Bay at kickoff, is it a forfeit into the next round? Does it treat it like a bye, or do the other teams in the league have to set up like the expansion system, like they would in case of a plane crash? Yes,
right. I think for the week it's a bye, but I think they'll probably keep the Packers and the Seahawks teams and then have expansion drafts for both of them afterwards. But yeah, I think for the week it's got to be a bye.
I think that's only fair. You know, it'd be too difficult to get everyone together and then play an NFL. Like, no.
Got to practice. Yeah, rough.
There's just not enough hours in the week to be able to pull that off. God, Seahawks and Packers. I want the Packers to win so the Vikings could potentially play the Packers, because I feel like the Vikings would be able to beat the Packers on the third game. But I don't know. that the Packers defense is this weird question mark. When it shows up,
it is very weird. Yeah. So here's the problem: is that the Seahawks have this thing where the analytics don't do a great job of describing the team's strength. So like the 49ers and like the Saints, they've been in a lot of close games. Unlike the Saints, their close games have been legitimately close. Like the Saints just kind of let people in the back door in garbage time, and so they become one-score games kind of incidentally. The Seahawks are just like in one-score games constantly, which is why their games are so weird. But the reason is because they like don't let their MVP candidate like have the ball. So then in the fourth quarter, they're like, oh, we got to win now. Ah, man, crazy. All right, I guess we'll have to win. And then Russell Wilson gets to throw it. And so like the underlying analytics for the Seahawks are kind of weird because play selection really doesn't tell you about the quality of the team at moments when the team has to become a quality team. Maybe this is a post hoc backwards explanation. Maybe it's narrative building. But I really do feel like the Seahawks play selection inhibits our ability to use analytics to describe or understand the team. For the Packers, I don't think that's the case. I think that the analytics tell us a lot about the team. And the Packers, from a lot of measures, are a better team than the Seahawks. But from just like, evaluating all of the units individually, the Seahawks are clearly superior. So I would go with the Seahawks, but it is weird. And you're right. Packers, the worst 13-3 team in the league. I don't see it for the Packers. I mean, Rodgers is just not playing well enough. And Russell Wilson's fallen off in the last month. So it's not as if, it's just super easy to say, well, this guy was the MVP candidate. But I do think that, the receiving core, which has improved over the course of the season, plus Russell Wilson's game, it's just going to make it too difficult for the Packers to keep up.
And it's not like the other thing is that, the Seahawks run game is, yay for beast mode for coming back and all, but it's not doing anything. And Maybe for selfish reasons, I'm picking the Packers, but I feel like at some point the whole like Cinderella thing for the Seahawks has to run out. Like you can't depend on dumb luck to win all of these one score games throughout the season. Like eventually this has to end, right? Like maybe this is the game that the Packers defense actually shows up and manages to like corral Russell Wilson a little bit and take out those receivers that he barely has. Like, I don't know. I'm not entirely convinced.
Well, but like, who is one more off of luck, the Packers or the Seahawks? I think the Packers. Like the Seahawks' luck is built off of Russell Wilson doing like impossible stuff. And at least he's like good. So impossible stuff is in the realm of possibility, as stupid as that sounds. The Packers, I think they've just been lucky. Like
the Packers just managed to like fall upwards.
Right. Which is not to say they didn't play better than the Vikings in the 2 Vikings wins. Mm-hmm. They did. But for most of their games, I feel like they've been like that first Chicago game. You're just like, man, who's trying to win here?
Yeah, that really did feel like a game of who wants it less. All right, so let's go over to the mailbag. And as a quick side note, I just want to give a quick shout out to Ernie, who managed to send us a pie recipe. And I don't know if you saw it, but ended up sending a pie recipe into the Norse Code email account that I had my wife try out, and it was very delicious. Thank you, Ernie, for the pie recipe. Anybody else who wants to send a pie recipe can do so at norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. You have my blessing to do such a thing. Beef Brewski asks, my perception is that Garoppolo is susceptible to turnovers. Is my perception correct? If so, do you think this plays a significant role in the outcome of this game?
Yeah, it is kind of weird actually. So if you take a look at, if you like went into Game Pass and you just like searched all of Garoppolo's interceptions, you'd be like, oh, so this guy who, and this gets covered, obviously when we talked to Kyle Posey, he covered a little bit of this. I think he's being a little generous in favor of Garoppolo, but, when you take a look at all of his interceptions, in Game Pass, you're like, oh, it's so unfair. I mean, this guy, he's one of the league leaders in interception rate, kind of. Like, he's like 27th, but the distance between 27th and 32nd is like enormous. But like, well, I mean, it's Winston, so of course it is. But you take a look at all of that, and you're like, wow, he's probably not actually that interception prone. I think but it evens out because he actually has had a lot of picks this year come off, like get dropped by defensive backs, which are obviously not in the interception finder or whatever, right? And so his turnover worthy play percentage by PFF matches his actual turnover rate, which is, like we mentioned in the interview, pretty high. 10 fumbles this year, what was a 7% sack rate, 27th in pick rate, which is 27th worst or 27th best pick rate. So, like 5th or 8th worst or something like that. So he is interception prone, but it is very easy to make the case, using one set of evidence or the other that, the numbers lied. He's actually more interception prone or less interception prone, depending on which evidence you want to look at. It is evened out for him. So he is pretty interception prone or pretty turnover prone. Like we mentioned in the interview, he does hold on to the ball. And that creates some opportunities for the Vikings to force fumbles on those sacks. It does create opportunities for interceptions. I think on the show last week, I said Anthony Harris is the threat to get a pick, right, against Drew Brees. It was either on this or on the Football Machine, but I mentioned it in a bunch of radio spots, so now I feel great. The problem is that Anthony Harris has had fewer picks against quarterbacks that throw a lot of picks, so I can't pick him anymore. I'll say it's Harrison Smith is too easy. It'd be funny? Xavier Rhodes. If Xavier Rhodes gets a pick, that would be hilarious. So let's go.
Like Xavier Rhodes, or let's say Andrew Sendejo.
That was my second. I was thinking Andrew Sendejo. Yeah. Rhodes or Sendejo. Really great options. Let's do that. And I do think it plays a significant role in the outcome of the game. Obviously in the sense that always turnovers, always have, huge swings on the outcome of the game. But I do think in the context of this question, I think they're basically asking, are these turnovers likely to happen? And I would say, yes, they are likely to happen. And therefore, they'll control, the outcome of the game in some way. So hopefully Harris doesn't drop a pick like he did against Seattle.
Raul asks, in this game, which defensive line has the stronger advantage over the offensive line?
Kyle is a little bit more optimistic about the nature of the interior offensive line for the 49ers than I am. But even so, I would argue that the 49ers have the better defensive line matchup than the Vikings. I think one, it's Nick Bosa is comparable to Hunter in terms of his impact. Two, I think Eric Armstead is probably better than Everson Griffin. Three, they have an interior pass rush. And that's kind of like a trump card in that context. I would say, Staley, who's having a down year, is better than Riley Reef, so that's not great. Brian O'Neill is probably not as good as Mike McGlinchey, although I can hear the argument the other way. And then the interior offensive, I think Pat Elflein is probably the worst offensive lineman out of all of them, on either side of the ball. So I think the matchup favors the 49ers when you take a look at who has better defensive line opportunities.
Kenneth Allen asks, remember when Arif said that there's no hope for the world generally a couple weeks ago? Well, somehow it's gotten worse since that. So my question is, what does it take for you to stop tempting fate, Arif? Also,
absolutely nothing.
Also, does this game feature the best fullback face-off of the year? And then you copy and pasted the picture from the movie Face Off with Nick Cage and John Travolta.
He said Face Off. I had to put it in the show notes. Yeah, Face Off.
I'm sure. Does this game feature the best fullback face off of the year?
No, the 49ers and the Ravens played each other, so that would probably be the best one. But this is a pretty good one. I don't know. We talked about Juszczyk in the interview, so I'm not gonna go into it too much. But because of his ability to be both a threat in the passing and the running game, it's going to be difficult to find a way to stop him. I would not be shocked if Eric Wilson gets a lot of play in this game. The problem is, he's such a poor run defender that if they keep on checking the runs with him on the field, which is likely the opposite of what you'd expect based off of the fact that he'd be on the field in base defense if there's no more injuries. But I wouldn't be surprised if they decided to run at him. As for I'm going to keep tempting fate, because if I'm correct, I'm going to keep trying to be correct. Like I said this last week, I root for my takes.
I'm not a Vikings fan.
Well, at least I predicted it.
Yeah, I just want my takes to be right. It's less of a thing about the team I'm reporting on and more about just justification for the thoughts that enter my head. Eli asks, any chance the 49ers interior defensive line is worse than Saints second stringer Shy Tuttle? From the TV, it looked like he destroyed our interior offensive line, specifically Bradbury, whenever he was a line in the zero. Definitely a concern considering how poorly Kirk is able to operate against vertical pressure, i.e. batted balls and fumbles. We didn't really talk much about the batted balls last episode, but it did seem like there was an abnormal amount of them. A normal amount for Kirk Cousins, but an abnormal amount of batted balls for just about any other quarterback.
Yeah. It was interesting. I think the TV copy talked about Tuttle a little bit too much, but he did have a very good game. The 49ers interior defensive line is a little bit better than Shy Tuttle, unfortunately. It'll create some problems.
Next question is from Ryan, who asks, down their two quickest cornerbacks, how does the Vikings secondary adjust to manage San Francisco's stable of shifty wide receivers?
Good question, Ryan. I don't know. As Kyle said, I mean, they're all very quick, right? To me, I see Deebo Samuel's kind of more after the catch than the rest of them, which is why I tried to distinguish them when I asked him that question. But yeah, they're all very quick. A lot of it might involve Sendejo and maybe Curse, who knows, who are both quicker than they look. So that could be a big part of it. And it might just be kind of making sure For after the catch stuff, they do a great job squeezing. And then also kind of just sit underneath and force Garoppolo to throw deep. I mean, which is what they did against Breeze, which actually, this is one thing I didn't even mention in my piece covering the game, is that the Vikings have done such an excellent job figuring out kind of what the team wants to do and stopping it defensively and forcing them into uncomfortable positions. So they force the Lions to throw short. They force the Chargers to throw short. They force the Seahawks to throw short. They force Breeze to throw deep. And here I would force Garoppolo to throw deep. And so they could be flooding underneath zones and not worry as much about matching up man to man against these receivers and more making sure that they've just got enough bodies and spaces to force them to throw deep, which, I mean, it's not like an ultimate solution. Kittle is pretty good deep downfield, so you still have to win your matchups. But they might, rather instead of trying to match up person to person, create schematic advantages that mitigate the quarterback instead of the receiver.
Next question is from Zach, who asks, is Zimmer's fourth quarter point differential in playoff games, outscored 44-12 in 4 games, more of an indictment about his conservative nature offensively or defensively in the final frame?
I think it's been different, right? Because like against the Eagles, it was like they were just getting blown off the doors on both sides of the ball. Against the Saints in 2017, it was certainly, a product of the defense just giving stuff up. It would have been nice if the offense did a little bit more, but it was very clearly a defensive problem. But in this game, it was an offensive problem, right? They should have been more aggressive and not tried to just sit on the lead. And so that was a problem with the conservative offense. The Seahawks game, I mean, that one was it was really cold. So you can't really, it was too cold to play football. So that was probably the problem. I would argue it's not a defensive or offensive problem.
Almost too cold to kick, really.
Yeah, one could argue.
Yeah.
In theory.
Collie asks, can Dan Bailey get it to the end zone anymore with his kickoffs or no? Does San Francisco have a good kick returner? I trust our D a lot more than special teams to contain the Niners.
Kyle seems to think the kick returner is pretty good. He's no Deontay Harris, according to Posey, so I'll trust him there. No, I don't think Bailey can get it through the end zone. I think some kickoffs he'll put it in the end zone, but returnable. That's probably the problem is sometimes like you're up against returners that'll return it no matter what, like Harris and like Cordero Patterson, that just they catch it and they're like, oh, that's the signal I should return. Having caught it, now it is my job to advance it. Yeah. Right? Which actually Patterson was a little bit more conservative in week 17 than I expected, and he still returned it a couple of times. So that might be part of it too. Like he might be kicking it relatively deep in the end zone and then he's just not doing it. He didn't do that against the Saints. And that's probably a team you definitely want to do it against. But yeah, I would say that could play a part in our perceptions. But yeah, I don't think he's like drilling it through the end zone. So that's a problem.
Don from Ohio asks, what is a better way to stop Kittle on Saturday? Place multiple bear traps around the field? Put a waist shackle on him at the other end placed on Linval? Or contact Tanya Harding tonight and see if she knows a guy?
So I was thinking about this because this is the funniest question that's been submitted. I don't think Dog Eddie Crane even submitted a question. So it's pretty easy trophy this week, Don. I would say I initially was leaning bear traps, but I think it's the waist shackle. So for the Tanya Harding one, there's no way that guy is going to get the jump on Kittle. Like Kittle probably just beats him up. Like what's he going to do to his knees that like the Ravens didn't already try? I think there's no way Tanya Harding knows a guy.
Tanya Harding probably doesn't know a guy in his 20s that's still in great athletic shape to be able to take care of that. No.
Right, yeah, exactly. Like Tanya Harding clearly knows a guy, but not a guy fit for this task. So there's that. The bear traps I was leaning towards. But I'm going to have to say no, because I think it's just as likely the Vikings defenders trip the traps. So that now he's running free. So I think the bear traps in isolation are probably the best option. I think, if he steps into a bear trap, that's your best option, but you can't guarantee that. So you got to go with the shackle. Linval's pretty big. Kittle's pretty strong. I would take Linval in that contest.
They're having a wrestling style strap match. It's going to be fantastic. Kyle Slaby asks, Stefanski is gone now, right?
It depends on if they win, right? Because if they win, then whatever team has to wait like a couple of weeks before hiring him. Which, I mean, that still happens. I mean, the Dolphins still got Brian Flores from the Patriots, and the Colts tried to get Josh McDaniels once.
Womp womp.
So, which I feel like we all why did we all forget this thing? Like everyone was like, oh yeah, the Browns are thinking about Josh McDaniel, and it's like the guy who like screwed the Colts, that guy?
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. But yeah, teams typically don't like waiting to get a start on this process. You want to get like people sent to like the Senior Bowl, get them up to date on the scouting staff and stuff like that. It's not impossible, but if the Vikings win, probably not. If the Vikings lose, I would say there's a good chance he gets interviewed, but really the only team that seems that interested are the Browns.
Well, they're the only team left.
Yeah. So the last team open. And they seem to have a couple of candidates. So it's not, I forgot that Rule was hired by the Panthers, earlier today.
Yesterday.
But yeah, I think there's certainly a probability of it if the Vikings lose. I don't think it's over 50%. Now that I've said that, he's gone.
Yeah, seems likely. Benjamin has the following message. For the regular season, the Vikings went 0-4 against teams that ended with 10 or more wins. So if you took all the 10-plus win teams in the NFL this year, had them play a 100-game season in a bubble universe, the Vikings probably aren't going 0-100, even if they are the worst good team in the league. They'd probably win 20 to 40% of the time, right? If we are on the 20% edge of that range, we just regress to our mean with the Saints win. But if the Vikings are on the 40% side with my totally scientifically determined estimate, could we be in the middle of watching a regression to the Super Bowl? I know that's not how stats work. I really just wanted to use the phrase regression to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I can't argue against this. This is rock solid.
Yes, exactly. Damian Barrett asks, I'm in need to avail of your parenting advice service. All right, Arif, here you go.
All right.
I made a bet with a Seahawks supporting friend of mine, possibly Arif, that if both of our teams make it to the NFC Championship game, we'd go. Only issue is that it's the same weekend as my daughter's first birthday. What should I do? Well, what do you think, Arif? You're a veteran of both children and relationships.
So my knee-jerk response was like, absolutely you go to your daughter's first birthday, but I've been thinking about this.
Oh, God.
I really don't want to turn into Bill Simmons, but I feel like this is the first step. Because this is like a question he entertains with the logic I'm about to use, right? Your daughter's probably not going to remember whether or not you were there, right? Like, she's what? Okay, but here's the thing. It's not about your daughter right now. It's about your partner, your wife, or, if you're married, your wife. It's about your partner. If they care, you absolutely go to the birthday. But if they're like, you're right, the kid probably won't remember, and you have to honor your commitments, then you go. I don't see someone being like, yeah, you made a bet. I'm going to do the birthday thing on my own without you and be totally happy about it. So I think you probably go to your daughter's birthday, but not because your daughter's going to remember you being there, but because your partner will.
Yeah. This isn't a birthday as what's what I'm looking for? As I believe it was Family Guy who expounded upon this in a very, very early season of the show. This birthday isn't for the daughter. This is for her. This is for your significant other.
Do it for her.
Yes. So if you want to be put into a position,
same page as Family Guy. Great. Can I change my answer?
If you want to be put in a position where you get to have that lorded over you for the rest of your relationship, which may not be long if you end up missing this birthday, admittedly, but you should have.
Take your family with you. What a great birthday party in Seattle. What, are the kids' friends going to be there? Are they going to remember missing out?
No, that not as. Have you ever flown with a 1-year-old? Have you ever flown with a child?
I've flown in front of one, man. Don't worry about it.
Easy. I flew with a 1.5-year-old. I hated people when they said like 18 months. Because at some point you're like, when do you stop saying the month thing?
Yeah. I think actually you can stop saying months around 20. Yeah. That, to me, that's the cutoff.
So like, I have a 27-month-year-old. No, you don't. You do not. You ass. I flew with an 18-month-old to Calgary. And that was 4 flights. That was Forks to Minneapolis, Minneapolis to Calgary, and then vice versa. And it was misery because they can't chew gum. They can't their ears are constantly having problems with the pressure and everything. It's just an absolute mess.
The primary problem is the pressure.
Yeah.
Are there tiny little baby earplugs that they manufacture? Is that not a thing?
You can put things over their ears, but really you don't want to put their ear canals are so small. It's not something that's really advised.
You don't want to jam stuff in a developing head. Yeah, that makes sense.
So,
again, parenting expert here.
Yeah. So, Damien, just do what I did. My son has a very, very, very late December birthday. And as a result, for whatever reason, it always seems like the Vikings are playing on his birthday. And for a couple of years, that was the case. So I just had the game streaming on my phone. I was all, running around and being the dad thing, but I kept looking down at the phone, even when I had money on the win total for the Vikings, and the over, and that game being the decision as to whether or not I was actually going to win that bet. I, was still doing the dad thing and still looking at my phone. So you can have it both ways. You just can't fly to Seattle to do it.
My parents did not throw me birthday parties when I was 1 or 2. I'm just saying.
Was this during the time that your medium age was like 7 during the 90s, or?
No, it was when I was 1 or 2, James. Keep up.
God. Of all the clips I've ever put into a clip show, your declaration of how you can't, you're not responsible for any musical decisions, any musical knowledge in your life from the 90s because your medium age was like 7, might be my favorite clip because it's the dumbest frickin' thing I've ever heard in my life. And I sat there like, how do I even refute this? You idiot. I hurt. I hurt so badly. Let's go to Eddie's question. Eddie the dog did actually ask a question. It was, how do you prevent cooperative board games like Pandemic and Forbidden Desert from becoming a game where one person is playing for the entire group?
Play with mentally strong people. I've never had this happen. Come on. That was maybe too much. That was a bit, and then it just came on way too strong.
Yeah. It might not be strong enough. I feel like you're not going after Eddie enough here.
No, I don't know. But I haven't really had this problem that much. Maybe it's because I typically play cooperative board games with my brother and my girlfriend, and they're both like very opinionated, like I am, and so when we disagree, we disagree. But I don't know. Well, it really depends on the person who's like taking over. Because if they just have that kind of personality, you're done. You can't really play board games with them. If it's you, then and you're trying to get everybody to kind of go along. Maybe the people that you're playing with are not super into cooperative board games, but if they are, B, you probably should just kind of change the way you come up with suggestions and seek specific feedback from people, like names, like, hey, Heather or whatever. Heather's a name people have, right?
That's a thing, yes.
Yeah. Heather, what do you think? Or maybe not that aggressive, but like, hey, Heather, what do you think about this?
No,
hey, Heather.
Aggressive.
Hey, Heather, thoughts? But,
why were they cheering?
But yeah, you probably have to like, alter the way that you come up with your ideas, because if it's you, I totally understand. Like, imagine me taking over group projects. Like, that seems like something you can't imagine me doing, right?
Mm.
But like, a lot of it, just making sure that you include people and try to get their thoughts, and then have multiple options and say, hey, we could go to, I don't know, where's the place mid-demic? Bogota, right? We could go to Bogota, we could go to Bogota, or we could go to Los Angeles. Los Angeles has, our second, research station. So, we might be able to cure a disease there, or, we could go to, Bogota and, treat some of the disease over there, right? What do you think is better? Why do you think it's better? Like, present options. And if you clearly favor one option, and they choose that option, don't say anything. They chose the option. Great. But if they choose the other option, sometimes just, if it's more important for you to develop the relationship, that you have with your board gaming friends, don't say anything. But other times you could be like, okay, cool. That makes a ton of sense. The reason I was thinking about Los Angeles was this, right? Just try not to be overbearing, I guess. It's very difficult for me to say. I just play with other overbearing people, so I don't have to think about this too much.
You're calling them overbearing, huh?
Well, I mean, I'm not. The reason it works is because I too am overbearing. We all are overbearing.
As the authority on the subject, let me tell you. PJ Lessie on Twitter asks, have you had a moment in your career where you felt like you, quote, made it?
Yeah, when I thanked everybody on the show last year and James made fun of me for it.
I didn't make fun of you for that. Other people did. I didn't make fun of you for that.
Absolutely did.
I feel like. Have I ever had a moment in my career where I felt... Actually, you know what? When I got my first paycheck at my current position, and I'm actually using... Because there's... For whatever reason, recording engineers either do one of three things. They either stop doing music and work on podcasts, because that's where the work is right now, which isn't a complaint. It's just where the work is. Or they become sous chefs, because I have no idea why, but a number of people who I graduated with at recording school are now sous chefs, or they become realtors. So the fact that I was able to graduate from my recording school from college and actually have a job with insurance, which is a rarity in the recording world,
it's huge.
To say the very least. Yeah, right around the time there was I had that at a decent wage and had insurance. It was I'm doing okay. I think I'm going to do just fine here. The ability to have insurance through your employer is a underrated feeling, which it seems odd, but no, it's totally underrated. You get that thing taken away and see how you feel about it.
I think that's a pretty good. I think that's kind of when I felt. I was I got health insurance. They plus vision and dental. Oh my god, they paid for my glasses, and I was like, I've made it. And then I put on these glasses, and then 6 months later, I lost the glasses. I can't find them.
Do you have to wait a full calendar year in order to use the benefits again to get your glasses, or you just lazy?
Probably not. It's January 8th. I don't think I have to wait a full year. I think I just have to wait for January to roll over. So I should do that.
You should try to be able to see again. That may be useful in your position. Pat asks our final question of the day. What are your favorite lines from the most legendary film to take place in San Francisco, The Room? Also, based on Tommy Wiseau's passing ability displayed in the film, where would he rank amongst the NFL North quarterbacks? I don't think he's fifth. I think he would be fourth. I haven't seen him try to throw left, though.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Obviously, it's a great question. Yeah, I would put him above Trubisky.
Acting ability and quarterback ability.
Yeah, no, both. Definitely both. He just has a grittiness, a stick-to-itiveness. If you've read any of the interviews about The Room, a little bit too much stick-to-itiveness.
Yeah. Belief in one's vision. And a mystery about themselves that they refuse to tell.
Right. So, yeah, I think, he's got a good chance to be better than... The problem is if we start including backups, Chase Daniel's probably better than both of them. So...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem.
Can we draft Tommy Wiseau to the Chicago Bears? I just want to see that. And as far as the best line from the movie is probably... Well, I still like the flower scene in all of its awkwardness.
Yeah, oh, well, so that's an ADR thing too, right? There's
yes,
no way. I was like, when I first thought about this, I was like, oh, Tommy Wiseau knows about ADR. Interesting. I wouldn't have expected that. I expected all the audio to be captured on set.
Yeah, there's some just terrible scenes in that movie. But
At least You're Tearing Me Apart is my favorite.
Tearing me apart. But if we're looking at his passing ability, at least it's shown throughout the movie that he believes in practice. So he is practicing. He is passing quite a bit during the movie. So I think the most legendary film to take place in San Francisco is still The Rock. But
it's a good film.
But the Room is still the Room is still a legendary film for San Francisco. With the third film in that listing probably being Bullet. I think Bullet is still pretty good in there. But so that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Arif is traveling out to San Francisco, so that should be Santa Clara.
I'm flying into San Jose, which is like right next to the stadium. It's so weird, man.
San Francisco is actually a laughable amount of distance away from the stadium.
20 minutes without traffic. It's apparently 2 hours with traffic, with stadium traffic.
Yeah, that's New Jersey to Manhattan travel right there. That's no good. So that is going to be it for this episode. Arif, what would you like to plug?
Yeah, hopefully I'll have a preview of the game written by the time I fly out. We'll find out.
Join us, will you, at theathletic.com. Why did they cheer? I don't God, that video. All right, so that is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Once again, thank you guys for listening. As a side note, we should have the for the Patreon subscribers, we should have the second clip show up and ready for you here in the next couple days. Also, if you received an email from me, please respond to it please respond to it, because I only have one response from the Tree Fitty group thus far. So if I need to get that response in order to send out your free stuff. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that you're tearing me apart, Lisa! And we'll see you next week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and co-host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at Norse Code DN. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can also be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.